1983 when he joined. We started the company end of 81, but basically 82, 83 is when the operation started. So he went to Bombay. He was doing teaching part of the day, and he was doing consulting for companies such as Bajaj Electrical was one of his first accounts. And I have many stories about that, but this is not the day for that. And from there, he went on and moving very fast, came into head office. He became responsible for instructional design and development, building content. Because we had decided when we started off with content from all over the place, but we decided we wanted to build our own. And quickly from building content, he said, well, we also need to build the technology on which the content will be delivered. So he built learning technologies. And then he was very busy seeing that, look, I have the technologies, I have the content, but there's a real learner and we have to engage with the learner. So learning services. And he pretty much built the vocabulary for the whole learning business. And when we looked at core competencies in the organization, when we first were affected by C.K. Prahlad's work, 2 of the 3 core competencies he was shaping. One was building learning materials, and the second was the education process management. The process of managing learning, which is a very personal experience, in a highly distributed fashion across cities first, and then across countries and across content. So how do you take something as creative as a learning process and how do you scale it? So he's had the opportunity to think that through, and then worked with young children in schools when we were trying to build content for them. And then he got a bug at some point to talk about process. He was in the first batch of people I handpicked in what I called as the Managing Director's Quality Club. 12 people in the very first batch, 1992. And then we were looking at quality management. We said we have to do things right. And he was instrumental in helping us find the guru we wanted to work with, which was Philip Crosby. And so Ashish was so taken up with the work on quality that he said, I want to spend some time just focusing on quality. And we created an entity for him, which we call the Institute of Quality Limited, IQL, which he founded and ran. And that actually worked first for NIT itself, but then for a large number of companies. And many of those companies, subsequently, he was assisting them in thinking about how to build a great organization. So what was quality as a process thing for us became quality as a philosophy, quality as culture, and quality in everything we do and how we live. And then he consulted for a number of companies at IQL and went on to assist their leadership teams in thinking about institution building and organization building. And then those were diverse set of companies. There was the DHL, the air freight company, there was Airtel, and a large range of companies. And I saw him grow from role to role. He was pretty much ready for the next role before we thought he was ready. And we let him navigate his path. And I have watched him, of course, throughout this period and thereafter as well. He continues to now guide many organizations, many startups. He is involved in advising Dell and in companies that do ventures. So he has his hand in all those things. But I would say that in him, I have seen a very curious person, an extremely curious person, always looking for what's around the bend, which you can't see. Very, very keen to try out new things. An exceptional personal character, I think, which becomes the basis when we talk of culture, when we talk of building integrity. So all that comes from the basic trait of being very curious, very intelligent, very helpful to people, very much committed to doing things right the first time. So many of these were native things which expressed themselves. And then, of course, the curiosity about how do organizations work, how should they work, what doesn't work, and then structuring all of that into the steps that he so nicely talks about in his book, from conceptualizing something to getting excited about it, to making it a little more concrete from a very abstract idea, and from the idea to a product or service being only part of the story. It's about how people will engage to make this happen. and the role of people and their values and their culture and their own uh, role of integrity to honor commitments. So I think he's been living this very interesting space between very abstract ideas and their very concrete implementation. So therefore, when he started talking about the book, and he's put it very well to say, how do you scale? Because many bright people can get a good idea, and many bright people can take up good pieces and put them together. But the difficulty comes when you have to scale it. And he's had the experience of acquiring. He acquired two very good companies for us. One which was created by a professor in Northwestern, and the other one by a set of entrepreneurs, a very big training company, and then integrating them as well. So I think he's had the opportunity, and he's taken the opportunity to be very creative, and he's done the journey from all sides. So it's just very relevant for a person like him to have attempted to put this experience into the book and about taking things from here to there. So I've had a reasonable look at his book. He sent me the manuscript as well, but I have to admit that I haven't done cover to cover in a line. I've been jumped from end to end, and I saw many interesting pieces of his experience, captured with integrity, told with great truth. I don't know all his experiences, but whatever he refers to is a very true expression of what he did, what went right, what went wrong, what he learned, and so on. So it's a living story of Ashish. The part that I know about, which is about maybe 70 or 80% of this, and I'm sure what he's done. I've heard of the other things he's done, but he's captured them well. So that's my introduction. He's an exceptional teacher, and I think he's become a good teacher in this book as well.
Thank you so much, Raji. And I should also say that while I was listening to this amazing introduction that you gave, I agree 100%. Ashish and integrity go hand in hand. And, we will hear from him in detail, but that was just such a well-rounded summary of who he is, who he stands for. Now we move on to the best piece of it, which is Ashish, tell us, and if you would speak for a while about the book, tell us about your learning, content, whatever you'd like to share with us, because we are officially launching your book now. Ashish, take it away and tell us about the book and share some of your insights.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Debjani and Raji. Thanks for a wonderful introduction. I'm not sure how much of it was deserved, but I'll take it. So I guess the idea of the book was, I guess it came about because I've been consulting with companies for a while, and there are some basic things which these are not new. I mean, many of the ideas in the book are not new, but there is a structure to how you execute them. And if you do it right, then people tend to be more successful than if they don't. So that was really the genesis of the book. Yeah.
Excellent.
So the way the book is structured is that there are. I mean, the idea here is that there are four levers. One is that there's a company called LiveWell. It's a fictional company where there is a consultant, there is a doctor who is also on the board. There are two co-founders, and then there is a person who is also someone who's an investor, and it's through conversations with them that we make each section come alive. So each lever comes alive through that. We define, I mean, the idea was to define a particular set of an evolution or growth of an organization, and each section has a preface and an epilogue, and there are chapters in the middle which explain the concepts. So there's a story which runs through the entire book, as well as a set of concepts which put them together. So broadly, this is the first section, which is strategic direction. And what it says here, this is a little story from Alice in Wonderland, which is, if you don't know where you're going, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I think the idea here is that how do you actually help an organization figure that out? So over the years, I've been working on vision mission statements, and everyone has their own interpretation of vision and mission. So here is mine. I use mission as the purpose of the company, why the company exists. I use the vision as what the big goal is. And then I use core strategies to explain what it is that, how exactly the company is going to be able to move forward. So just to give you an example, a mission statement is, for example, one of the ones that inspired me the most is Disney's. Disney's earliest mission statement was to make people happy. You can immediately understand, a mission comes from the heart. You can immediately understand what they're trying to do and what they're trying to say through that, and who the people are who will work for the company. I'd like to share another one which I thought was interesting. It's also in the book. Nike, their current mission statement says to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Nice. But what they used to have earlier is to experience the emotion of competition, winning and crushing competitors. You get a sense of, because when Nike came up at the beginning, it was Adidas with the big boys and they want to take them on. You can almost see what kind of a company this is going to be, right? I mean, this is a company which is going to kind of take on people who are hungry for competition. This is not about good or bad. This is about what the soul of the organization is. Then when we come to the vision, while there are all kinds of ways that you can state the vision, the one that I like are the big, hairy, audacious goals. So for example, GE had one which has become number 1 or number 2 in every market we serve. So it's very clear that they will get to number 1 or number 2 or they'll get out of the business. Similarly, another interesting one was YouTube. In 2012, they set a goal to reach 1 billion user hours every day by 2016. I mean, you have to just, it's a crazy number, right? I mean, it's 1 billion user hours every day. It's not 1 million, it's not. And 2 years into, when they did this in 2012, 2 years into it, which is 2014, they had only reached 100 million hours per day. And then they changed the entire organization around. They relooked at everything, including from technology to how they approach the market and everything. And they were able to reach that goal that they set for themselves. So having a big, hairy, audacious goal is, in my definition, what a vision is. And then you move to core strategy, which is the broad how, which is, at the highest level, what is it that you will do which distinguishes one organization from another. And I mean, there are 5 P's of core strategy. The P's are mine, but the model is effectively fairly similar to Porter's model, and which is based on the fact that you have to have something unique about you. You have to have a real deep understanding of the customer, a key insight. Then you have to be able to have something which you do, which is differentiated and which is unique to you. One of the feedback that I got when I was writing the book was that, today a lot of companies are not traditional companies, right? They're platform companies. In fact, 7 out of the top 10 companies in the world today are platform companies. So the idea is that, can we make platform companies, can we integrate platform companies also into the model that exists? So that's what I've done in the book. I've sort of combined traditional businesses as well as platform businesses and sort of put together the 5 Ps, which can help you define what your core strategy is, irrespective of what kind of a company you are. That's the first section. The second section is about breakthrough initiative. So if you know where you are going, after that, the big thing is focus. And invariably, a company tries to do too much, or there are lots and lots of initiatives, many of them, some of them getting done, many of them not. So at the top level, you need a few which you focus on, which you say, these are the ones that I'm going to get done. And then you treat them as initiatives which are transformational. So they're not business as usual. They kind of really change. So that's why they're called breakthroughs. They change the way you do things. And then these are both objectives and strategic programs. And there's a tool which, I created several years ago. And then there are a number of us who used it. I think Vineet is also on this call. He's someone who's also helped develop this, where the idea is that, we have objectives on the left-hand side, which is, for example, in this example, it says expand the doctor network, increase sales, and so on. And then you have programs which are as columns. And then you have these funny symbols, which are actually Japanese traffic lights, which show whether there's a high correlation, medium, or low correlation. and you use this to determine whether these are, how important are these initiatives and what the impact will be if they don't finish. So, and this becomes a single sheet which everybody can then, all the senior managers and all the companies that we work with, they keep it, they put them up in boards and so on. So they stay focused. And, whenever you change a strategy, you come back and change the strategy matrix as well. It doesn't take long. It's something which always keeps you current to what needs to happen. The third lever is the management process, which is to align the organization. So once you know where you're going and you have your big things, the next one is to be able to get every person in the organization also to support it. And those are organization objectives and key results and reviews. And here actually I've used the concept of OKRs, again, not mine. And there is a nice book which explains the whole thing. And this is now OKRs are being used by almost all the big technology companies in the world today. And the concept of OKRs is really the cadence. It changes. I mean, the idea is to be able to look at a 3-month time frame. And in those 3 months, what do you do? So for example, your objective may be longer. So OKR stands for objectives and key results. Your objective may be for a year, but your key result will be for a quarter. So what will you finish this quarter? And they're normally stretch objectives, stretch result areas, so that you may or may not achieve the full thing, but you sort of move the organization along. And it's a very transparent process and it's participative and so on. And it's really something which is more appropriate for our time. And to that, I mean, the one thing which very often is a challenge which I find is that reviews. In most companies, reviews is a process where the reviewer is there to beat up the reviewee. So which means, why hasn't this happened? What's the gap? And, then push them. Whereas the review process should actually be for problem solving. So a review process is something where if there is a gap, the idea is what do we do to make that gap? So firstly, the reviewee should be presenting what their plan is. And the reviewer should be questioning that and helping them, meet that plan, rather than everybody just beating each other up. So that's the reason I kept this slide is because that's to me a very big thing. It doesn't really happen as well as it should. And the last is about the culture, core values. So, normally people do vision, mission, values. To me, mission and vision are, the mission is sort of, values lead off from the mission. But the vision is something which is a hard number. It sort of makes sure that you're focused on what your goals are, whereas the values are soft, and that's what keeps your organization going. And even for anyone who is not interested in soft areas like values and so on, what it really does is that it helps you move your company into having a will-do culture, which is people then, if in an organization which is a good culture, people will come and volunteer to do things. They will do it, not just they can do it. So it's not about just building skills. It's about, do people want to do things? So do people feel that the organization that they're working with is theirs? Because they are spending a lot of time in the organization. How does that work? So that's really the big thing here. And of course, there are, and normally what happens, my apologies. Normally what happens is that when we look at values is we write those out in statements and then we expect others to follow it. We expect the organization, employees to follow it. But it must be supported by policies. You must have something which says, how are you as an organization helping the deployment of core values? So so there must be policies to support that. And then of course you have to build the competencies of people so that they are actually able to deliver to these values. And this is how the whole framework comes together. I showed all the pieces before. So the mission, from the mission, you get your vision and values, and that's one flow. The vision gives you core strategies, which is the what and how, which are the high level what and how, and then the breakthrough objectives and strategic program, which is the next level. And this is how the whole organization framework works together. In my book, in addition to this, I've added 2 annexures. Because I thought it would really help anyone who kind of wants to use the book to, sort of move their, to actually do things within organizations. So I've added a total of 20 tools. And these tools, there are 5 of them which are around understanding of business. There are 5 which are to help you execute your strategy. There are 5 which help you define your strategy, and 5 which are for very specific circumstances. So they're just briefly outlined in the book. But if you're really trying to kind of look at how you want to run your business, these tools are, very, very important to being able to do things. And they're not actually in one place. So I just thought I'd put it there. So this is one annexure. And I have another annexure at the end, which is basically just to help anyone who does it. It's just a simple set of questions. You can just agree or disagree and so on about whether these things are true for you. And you can see whether it helps you understand whether you're ready for scale. And to the extent that you're not, it tells you what your gaps are and how you should be and what you can possibly do to fix it. This is the last thing, which is, I wrote the book, I sent it out to a few people, and it was truly touching for me that, people like Pramod Bhasin, who was the founder of Genpact and really scaled it, from nothing to a lot. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, who is Naukri and has a lot of investments, including Zomato and so on. Meena Ganesh, who's now Portia Medical. And Will Poole, who is the co-founder, managing partner of Unitas Ventures. All of them had nice things to say about the book. And that itself was something which really made my day. So that's a bit of an overview. My apologies for my voice. I'm not particularly well today, but it doesn't really, it's not important. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashish. That was just really insightful and learned a lot. I too have been reading your book, and particularly some of the tools, that list of 20 tools, just I've already started referring people to that. Very, very relevant. As you were speaking, questions have been coming in. And the first question is actually, how can I get a signed copy of your book? Are you planning any event where I can get a physical signed copy of your book? So I guess that's an easy question. I will ask that one first before I go on to the second one.
Yeah, sure. A mail and let's figure it out.
Okay, so at the end of it, I will give your email address.
There isn't a specific event. Yeah, let me kind of figure out how to get that across.
Absolutely. Okay, and now we move on to the next question. And the question you talked about the levers, which I found so interesting, the way you have it, strategy first, and then leading into the other three levers in terms of breakthrough and process and culture and competencies. So the question was, which of the levers, is there a lever that is more important than the other levers? And if so, which one is it?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a very good question. You need the first one first. If you don't know where you are going, then the rest of it is largely irrelevant, which is that, people can have a culture if they like, and they can have priorities, but they have to have clarity on what their big goal is and, what their vision, mission, and their core strategy is. So if you don't have your core strategy in place, the rest of it is very hard to kind of get aligned. But having said, once you have the first one done, then the second, whatever you do in the order that you take it is basically where your gap is the biggest. So you can find out that this is, if your culture is very weak, then improve that first. But you must first know where you're headed.
Thank you very much. The next question that we have has to do with, is your book more for startups? Does your book apply more for startups, or is it a more general book?
So I guess to answer that question, the example that I used in the book is that of a startup. But the places in which it's been implemented have actually been across. It's been both startups as well as organizations, as well as divisions within organizations, which are large and which have used it over time. So I think the principles that we talk about there work any which way. They are good principles to be applied anyway. But yes, I think a person, an organization which is a startup and wants to scale right now will probably find it more useful than everybody else.
Excellent. So now I'm in a slightly tough spot because there are some excellent questions coming in, and we've come to the point where we have to transition into the panel discussion. So Ashish, I want to reiterate, you said that you will disposition all of the questions. Shreya is capturing them. Would you like to do one more question before we transition to the panel?
Sure.
Okay, so this question has to do with what was the toughest part of the whole book writing process?
Okay, so okay, a good question again. Writing the book was, for me at least, not hard. I mean, I just set a goal. I say I have to write 2,000 words a week, and I just go ahead and write it, and it finishes. But after that, I had to read it, and it was terrible. So the difficulty after that was, I mean, was to actually fix it, because I tried to fix bits of it, and then that didn't work because the flow got ruined, and I had to pretty much rewrite it. So that was probably the toughest bit. Everything else was well, I mean, less difficult, though quite painful. I mean, the book writing process is a little bit more painful than one expects.
Thank you very much.